Kathleen already said, this will be we will do it in 3 voices. So I will start to give a bit of a context around the COAR Notify initiative. What are the problems that we are trying to address? What is the questions that we are trying to address? Then Martin will dive more deeply on the technology and also talking about the resources that we have been developing to support the implementation of Notify. And then finally, Tamy will present us where we are and what we are planning to do in the coming years, because we are just completing the first year of Notify. So, okay, so what is the current context? I think we are all and I think the research community and research performing organizations, research funders, are increasingly aware of the shortcomings of the current scholarly communication system. We have a system that is completely focused on one type of research result or research output, that is the article. We have a system, but because of several things, because of the mantra of publish or perish, and also the inefficiencies of attaching peer review to journal selection, produces long lag times between when a paper is ready to be made public and the moment that it really is made public through publication, that incentivize the publishing in trending journals, in trending topics, in English speaking journals and also commercial journals, of course. That is highly that has a very high cost, much more than needed, both on models that of subscription or through APCs, and in many ways is also a legacy of the print system. So this is what we the current system that we it's not open, that is not sustainable, that is not inclusive or equitable, and not talk about not being innovative, and this is the issue that Notify is also trying to address. In scholarly communication system and in journals, it's almost universally agreed that there are 4 main functions of journals and scholarly communication system. One is registration. So I have produced this result and I want to register that my intellectual primacy on doing that. The other one is certification. This is a solid scientific result that is according to the best standards of the community, and this is done through peer review. And then we have the third function is we want that result that has been certified, that is disseminated to the wider audience possible. And finally, the fourth function of journals are archiving and preservation. So we want to have a full record of science, and journals have this function. In the print world, and this was exactly the role of journals 350 years ago and today. In the print world, these 4 functions need to be, it made sense that these 4 functions were done together by the same entity and by the same artifact, the journal. And that is in the print world. But in many ways, what we have done now in the transition to the digital world is that we just put the digital the digital technology in the same kind of method and workflow, not really taking full advantage of the digital environment. So we think, and many people think, that we need a paradigm shift in scholarly communication. We need, sorry, this is not okay. We need to unbundle these 4 functions of journals. And in doing that, we will also kind of break the divide between gold and green and gold open access, and because both repositories and other types of services or journals or other types of services can bring together to provide what we need and what we want. And also the other point that I will also briefly mention is there are the advantages of adopting this model of that has been called the publish, review, curate, where instead of we review before publishing, we publish, and then the review, the curation are done at a later stage. So for the first part, the unbundling, what we are seeing, and this is also what we have been advocating on the next generation repository recommendations, is really that repositories can be the foundation and can be the beginning of the scholarly communication workflow. I usually joke and saying that we want that to change the situation where repositories are the graveyard of things that are born elsewhere, to be the birthplace of scholarly communication. So we don't want repositories to just host papers that have been published 6 months ago elsewhere, and then there is a version on the repository. We really want to shift, and our vision is to shift this. And so repositories can do the two extreme functions of this for one. So the registration and the archiving can be performed by repositories. And then the two other functions, and maybe I didn't say that, I think the 4 functions are still very important and needed in the digital environment. My point is that they don't need to be bundled as they needed to be on the print world. And so the two other functions, like certification and dissemination, they can be performed by other services like journals or other types of services that can use the content that relies on repositories to provide this service, the peer review, the certification, creating dissemination channels that can be journals or can be other types of dissemination channels. And this is what we are trying to do. The model of the publish, review, curate is exactly try to address some of the problems that I already mentioned. So the fact that the process of publication is long is also attached to the fact that the peer review is attached to the selection process, and it should be, and it could be detached. And because of that, and because the theme of the research assessment reform is a very important one, because of the mantra of publish and perish, or publish on the highest impact factor journal that you can reach. What happens is that I try to publish on Nature, and then my paper is rejected in Nature. I submit to the International Journal of Genetics. And then if it is rejected on the International Journal of Genetics, I will submit it to the Portuguese Journal of Genetics. And by doing this, we are wasting 1 year, 2 years of some results that could be interesting. For instance, for the study of genetics in Portugal or elsewhere. And so the published, review, curate model can be a solution for this. And as this is also attached to open peer review, this can also be a solution, or part of the solution, not the solution for sure, but part of the solution of the review fatigue. Because I think also open peer review it's very important, because if the review are public, they are part of the conversation about publishing. They can be also they can be accountable. They can be considered on the research performance evaluation of people. They can use Peter and others to build better recommendation systems for finding future reviewers for papers. So there are really an advantage of detaching this. And we have good news, because especially on the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen also ignited by COVID, but there were already things going on before the pandemic. We have seen a kind of an explosion of services and that are using this kind of models and innovation on this realm. And lastly, we have also, it was very encouraging to see last year Coalition S explicitly recognizing that the papers that are reviewed in journal independent platforms are of the same value of papers that are published in regular journals. And this is, and for instance, and for compliance with open access policies of those founders, this is the same. So in a nutshell, what we want is really to transform the current situation and to be able to consider all the research outputs, not just journal articles, that we could have rapid dissemination of results through sharing preprints and open peer review, that we can have open all the open content that can support artificial intelligence and machine learning, as we have just heard, and really to use all the potential of the web, because we have not really done that yet. We have not used all the potential of the web. So what we want, our vision is a universal quality control research communication system that can really be also related with this vision of the knowledge commons that COAR has been working on for several years. So I will move, maybe I'm getting a little bit delayed, but just 2 more slides. I want us to have time at the end to questions, because I think it will be very important to have the opportunity to ask us questions. So this is building on previous work. The COAR Next Generation Initiative was already mentioned a couple of times this afternoon. In 2019, there was also a paper that was published that was the PubFair conceptual model, where we also tried to develop this model of having separating kind of 3 layers and having different dissemination channels. And then on 2020, it was just before 1 month before the pandemic, we had a meeting in Paris where the technical architecture was started to be developed. And then in 2021, the initiative was really launched. And as you probably almost all of you know, in July last year, we had a very generous grant from the Arcadia Foundation that is helping us to really put resource and accelerate the development and especially the adoption of the COAR Notify. In a nutshell, the aim of this project is really to facilitate and to accelerate the community adoption of this of a standard, interoperable and decentralized. I think the 3 words are very important here. We try to build a standard way, so each service does not need to negotiate. Each repository does not need to negotiate with each different review service or other type of service, and each review service or each journal does not need to negotiate with each individual repository. We want this to be also building on our decentralized view and approach of the web, and our main use case, it's not the only one, and Martin and Tamy will talk about it, is open peer review and trying to develop overlay journals and open peer review services. And we are using this, I think Martin will probably stress this, we are building this using linked data notification. So we are not trying to invent nothing, we are trying to use what already established technology. We have a great team, as you can see, and we are all here. So if you have, apart from the session today, if you have doubts or questions, don't be shy. So approach us during this day. So as already Kathleen already presented us, I just want to also to mention that apart from the PIs, Tamy, that is the project manager, and also Carla, that is supporting us also. We have 2 expert advisors, Herbert van den Sompel and Patrick Ostenbach, that are helping us to work on the development of the protocol. And with this, this is my last slide. We are already working in different stages of implementation. In some cases, we are kind of just initiating a conversation. In some cases, we are really already working, and work and development is going on. But I think Tamy at the end will explain more what are the different stages of these different implementation partners. So, and with this, I hand over to you, Martin.
This is better. So thank you, Eloy. Yeah, I'm Martin, and I will spend a couple of minutes very, very briefly talking about technology, the technology we're using and utilizing within the Notify project. I will, by means of a fairly straightforward example, the example of a peer review on a preprint hosted in a repository, outline how Notify can work and how Notify can provide value to parties that participate in the project, that are implementation partners. And last but not least, briefly outline a few resources that we have developed, that we continue to develop, that will help or that are aimed at helping implementation partners succeed, right? So very quickly, this is not meant to be scary, just the two very brief slides about the technology behind Notify. As Eloy had alluded to, we're using the W3C standard linked data notifications to facilitate the message transfer between entities, right? So this is a very somewhat simple protocol based on HTTP. So we're building on standards that are adopted by the community on the web. You can kind of think of it a little bit. If you look at the diagram here on the right-hand side of the slide, you will recognize a sender and an inbox and a consumer. So conceptually, it's not that dissimilar from email, right? Someone sends a message from A to B. That's a very simple, very similar context, and it probably suffices to leave it at that for now. The second technology heavy-ish slide, sorry, that was bad to translate, is the slide about activity streams 2. This is also a W3C standard. We're utilizing this standard to define our payloads. So this is the actual content that we're sending back and forth between entities that participate in the Notify universe, if you will, right? And this slide is not, the right-hand side of the slide is not meant to be read. This is just an example. Our payload, so the content of the messages that we're sending, is serialized as JSON LD. I only mention that because this is something, if you're a developer, you will recognize as machines love it, right? So it's another approach of lowering the barrier of entry and enabling our implementation partners to make progress very, very quickly. Because there are a lot of libraries and software packages available that help you generate and read, parse JSON LD. We keep stressing by design that these payloads are very, very slim, right? You will see that this is not a very, very long message. It's a very short message, which is by design, and we're not ingesting any bit streams, if you will, into these messages, right? So there is no PDF document attached to this message. This entire message is based on pointers to things that live on the web. So you will find a lot of URLs in this message that point to, for example, the PDF of a preprint hosted in a repository, but we don't ingest the actual PDF, for example, right? This concept is usually referred to as pass by reference rather than pass by value. We very quickly found ourselves recognizing that the activity streams 2.0 vocabulary, if you will, is not all that expressive for our use case. So we will probably add some vocabulary to our payload, but we're trying very, very hard to keep that also very slim, with the intention of enabling and fostering interoperability, right? You can probably Imagine that if you include all sorts of ontologies, all sorts of unique terms into a message, you're really lowering the chances for interoperability, right? All right. So by means of a simple use case, let me explain how messages can be sent back and forth between entities and what that means in terms of the value that we're adding to the scholarly communication landscape. So let's assume I have my HAL repository on the left-hand side and my PCI service that provides peer reviews on the right-hand side. I'm a good scholar, right? I upload preprints to repositories, and so I upload my preprint to HAL. It is published, and receives a URI at which you can access this PDF document, let's say, on the web. For the sake of argument, let's say that my preprint is identified by URI P for preprint. So now as an author, I would like to request a peer review on my preprint. It is hosted at HAL, it stays there, but I would still like someone to review my manuscript. So the repository can enable a linked data notification with a notify specific payload to be sent to the PCI peer review service, conveying my request for review, right? This message will effectively say, there's a PDF document here hosted at a HAL, I'm the author, and I'm sending you, PCI, a request to please conduct a peer review on my manuscript. So now PCI will consider this request, right? They will do probably some analysis, whether they can do that. Do they have the capacity to do it? Do they have a sufficient pool of reviewers that are competent to do it and have time, let's say? And will eventually, let's say, make the determination, yes, we will review this manuscript, we can do it. And to properly basically respond to HAL, PCI will send an acknowledgement message back to the repository conveying exactly that. Yes, thank you for your review request. I will conduct the peer review, right? So now, as you can imagine, you're already in the situation that you can provide additional information on both sides of the equation, right? So the HAL repository can maybe update the landing page, if you will, and state this manuscript that you're currently looking at is under review. The review is ongoing at PCI, right? Because that connection has already been made. PCI, on the other hand, could also advertise the very similar picture by saying, you know what, I'm currently busy reviewing the manuscript that is hosted at HAL over there, right? That already is, from our point of view, value added to the scholarly communication landscape depicted by this very, very simple two-entity example, right? So that's already a connection that didn't exist before, and that's already value that we can add to the individual parties playing notify. Eventually, PCI will conclude the peer review, right? The peer review, let's say, has been completed. And for the sake of argument, let's assume the peer review has been published. So PCI publishes its peer reviews and assigns them a URI, of course, because they are accessible on the open web. And let's assume this peer review is available at URI R for review, right? Once that step has been completed, PCI would send yet another message, another linked data notification with the activity streams 2 payload back to HAL again and say, you know what, this review request that you sent me a while ago, I am done with the peer review, and here it is. And by here it is, I mean, we're now exchanging again information that contains both URIs, right? Which allows HAL to say, I have a manuscript, it's available at URI P, and it has been peer reviewed at PCI, and the corresponding peer review is available at URI R, right? So my PDF stays where it's at, my peer review stays where it's at, and we can now link. We can create a bidirectional link. And bidirectional, of course, also because PCI can, again, tell the very same story, saying I have conducted a peer review that I am hosting, it's available at URI R, and it refers to the PDF manuscript, let's say, hosted at HAL over there at URI P, right? So now we have a fully connected graph, the two nodes, but still connected in a way that they know of each other, right? We're connected services that are otherwise disconnected and don't necessarily know of each other. And in the past, it would take 27 emails between authors and editors, let's say, right? And now we can automate this process in a way that we're creating a connection and we're providing the opportunity for bidirectional linking, which then opens the door for all sorts of other downstream processes, as I'm sure you can imagine. All right. So a few slides on the resources that we as a project team try to provide to our implementation partners to make their lives a little bit easier, hopefully. Starting, of course, this will not be a secret to you, the canonical COAR Notify website. I'll put the link here on the slide, which is where we provide generic updates, right? This is basically your typical project webpage with some background information, where we were, of course, and still are very proud to announce our funding and these sort of news and updates that you can expect on a regular basis. There's a blog post linked from there and those sort of things. The second resource is a little bit more on the technical side of things. So that's our technical documentation. Basically your, if you will, your reference piece that as an implementer you could go back to. You can read up on the scenarios, patterns, use cases that we support, and what is expected from the implementation partners for individual scenarios and patterns, such as the peer review case that I just outlined. Paul specifically is instrumental in creating and maintaining the developer's handbook. So that's a little bit more, even more on the technical level, where you would find basically how-tos, right? Instruction documents for the discovery of the individual repositories or review services or other entities that play in the Notify landscape. So I encourage you to check out the handbook if you're technically inclined. That's a very valuable resource to support implementation efforts just getting started. Last but not least, basically hot off the press, because this has just been launched, is our Notify Validator, which provides an inbox. If you remember the linked data notification graph, the inbox is similar to your email inbox where notifications are being sent to, right? And so here the idea is we have created an inbox that is publicly available to anybody. Anybody can send a notification to this inbox and see whether it has arrived or not as the first in a first instance, and also can validate the message, can validate the payload. So for example, if I intended to send a review request message, I can take this message and just send it there for test purposes, and I can see whether A, it actually arrives, B, whether it was formatted correctly, and C, whether the payload is accurate and accurately conveys the review request that I intended to convey, right? So this is an open resource basically available to everybody, though probably still buggy and not stress tested. So I'm not sure what would happen if this service received 5 million messages in half a second, but so far it seems pretty stable. If you click on one of those messages there, you will see the payload that you have sent, and you get a link to validate your message. And this is the RDF validation that gives you fairly hard to interpret, but still the notion of positive or negative, right? Was the validation successful or did it fail? And you get some graph visualization of what your message looks like, because it is RDF. All right. So I assume, actually hope, that your thoughts are already wandering away and towards what else can Notify support, right? What other use cases are there? What other use cases may hit a little bit closer to home? What sort of need would I have in my environment where Notify could be applicable? And here's a surely incomplete list of things that fell out of our heads and that we have seen demand for in the past, or we continue to see this demand. We initially focused on the peer review use case of a preprint, for example, but all or most of those are certainly in scope at some point in time, right? So we'd like to be as inclusive as possible there, and we would hope to find more use cases than what we can currently think of. The overlay journal to preprint linking seems like a natural use case. Something that we're excited about and we're actually working on to an extent is the notion of linking from a preprint to the corresponding data set, to the corresponding code, right? A scenario where I upload my preprint, and since, as I mentioned, I'm a good scientist, I upload my data set that I have created that is underlying that underlies the information that I convey in my paper. And I also created some source code that I upload to GitHub, for example, and that could be linked too, right? In which case I would have a much more rich, fuller, fully connected graph of different entities, a data repository, a source code repository, and a manuscript, let's say, repository that could all be interconnected and then convey this notion, well, you know, these resources are connected, right? And we think in metrics and archiving and all these sort of other use cases on top of that linking. Something that I'm personally very intrigued by, we briefly talked about this here in this group as well. If we step away maybe a little bit from the traditional view of peer review and broaden that spectrum a little bit, and maybe also step away from the traditional printed or published manuscript and think of micropublications, for example, there are many more scenarios that I find intriguing, right? So maybe this could be a authenticity check of a tweet. This could be just give me your opinion about my blog post, right? So we can broaden the horizon a little bit in both directions and probably in more directions to create a scenario where sending notifications back and forth is really creating a value added, because then we can link, then we can build on principles of the web that allow incredible, probably downstream applications that we currently can't even imagine just yet. So I think with that, I'll stop here and hand it over to Tamy.
Ok, bueno, este es el momento esperado para los hispanohablantes. Híbrido no solo por virtual presencial, sino también porque vamos a estar switchando entre inglés-castellano durante estos días. Bien, a modo de recordatorio, porque estos objetivos ya fueron presentados el año pasado en la reunión anual de COAR, los objetivos del proyecto, los voy a leer en castellano, son establecer servicios de alto perfil en ciencias sociales y humanidades, en ciencias de la vida, así como en contextos nacionales que utilizan el protocolo Notify para apoyar la revisión por pares de los recursos del repositorio. Desarrollar, perfeccionar y mantener el protocolo Notify, incluida la evaluación y documentación de otros casos de uso valiosos. Aumentar significativamente la oportunidad de que otros socios utilicen el protocolo Notify, desarrollando la capacidad técnica en plataformas de revisión por pares y en repositorios de código abierto de gran uso. Y por último, apoyar el desarrollo de una plataforma de código abierto con uso de Notify para revistas overlay. No encontramos una buena definición, una traducción en castellano, así que le vamos a llamar revistas overlay, basada en una plataforma de publicación de revistas de código abierto existente. Bien, ¿qué se viene? Ya atravesamos un primer año muy nutrido. De eso nos dimos cuenta cuando tuvimos que escribir el informe, el primer informe anual, y ahí nos dimos cuenta que habíamos hecho bastantes cosas. Entonces se viene un segundo año de proyecto en el que vamos a continuar apoyando el desarrollo con los socios de la primera fase, que son básicamente repositorios y plataformas de código abierto, para que pasen a una segunda fase. También se viene un llamado a propuestas para la plataforma de revistas Overlay de código abierto y la supervisión del desarrollo inicial. Para los años 3 y 4 van a estar dedicados a refinar los flujos de trabajo definidos, comenzar las actividades de divulgación y participación de la comunidad, finalizar y lanzar la plataforma de revistas Overlay, completar los desarrollos técnicos y aumentar el impacto en la comunidad con una muestra amplia de servicios y casos de uso que implementen el protocolo Notify. En ese marco, además de estar trabajando y haber trabajado con los socios, con Peer Community In y con la red de repositorios de Portugal, nos encontramos trabajando en escenarios y casos de uso con la referencia, Redalic, Zenodo y Humanities Commons. Nos encontramos preparando planes de implementación con CSIC Digital, eLife, Pre-Review y OJS. Y tenemos en marcha desarrollos técnicos con DSpace, Hall, Epicence y Peer Community. En síntesis, los próximos años, y verán en sintonía con los objetivos que volvemos a recordar, los siguientes desarrollos. Bueno, el servicio de validación ya ha sido completado este año. También este año se viene la convocatoria a la revista Overlay en código abierto. Para el 2024, el catálogo de COAR Notify. Para el 2025, la segunda fase para los implementadores, los socios implementadores, y las actividades de participación y de compromiso con la comunidad. Porque queremos que cada vez haya más socios y repositorios que sean parte de este proyecto. Muchas gracias. Preguntas.